So, map making as image making, the title somehow didn't register on the slide. The case of East Central Europe. So my paper does not focus on art of East Central Europe, but on maps. And can you hear me? Do I have to use that? Yes. And on the cartographic strategies as applied to the region of East Central Europe as a spatial entity rather than art historical entity. What I'm concerned is the importance of the map for the region, as well as the relationship between the map and the image. If maps are analyzed as images, what messages could they convey for studying art? The theoretical discourse about cartography discussing the maps as instruments of power or dialogue has seldom focused on the eastern peripheries of Europe, where the map, both as a tool of power and knowledge and a script of resistance, constitute an intrinsic component of the region's identity. Not only does it precede the territory, but it is routinely chosen as the area's or metaphor. The post-World War I launch of the first cartographic mandate of the region identified the area with a bunch of the small states of Europe, drawn by the map makers of Versailles on the body of the collapsed empires, as on this map of the 1920s. The subsequent arbitrary gesture of reshaping the map of Europe in Yalta conjured up both the territory behind the Iron Curtain and a whole range of competing geographical metaphors from the communist bloc to the kidnapped West. Even if not preceded by the map, the fall of the wall, an instant metaphor in its own right, was hastily followed by the influx of new maps and atlases redefining the eastern periphery of Europe that has emerged from behind the debris. Regardless of the attempts to move beyond the map when rethinking East Central European studies, as in the recent collection of essays edited by Julia Komska, the map is here to stay, and it is in need of critical interrogation. The intermediality of the cartographic language, utilizing both text and image, makes it particularly open to the interdisciplinary inquiry from social sciences and humanities. One of the less explored avenues of further research is offered by visual studies. If the map precedes the territory, is it the image which precedes the map? Almost 40 years ago, the founder of critical cartography, Brian Harley, to advance his critique of the map, turned to the methods of art history, Piotrowski, and to visual culture. In his canonical Deconstructing the Map, the article of 1989, Harley's conceptualization of the map as an image drew from a new approach to the domain of the visual proposed by Mitchell's iconology of 1986. Visual culture, which contested the positivist claims and aims of art history, developed in parallel to the critical cartography, sharing its social constructivist outlook, its attention to exclusion, as well as commitment to theory. Its embracement of all kinds of imagery and technologies of vision, including cartography, opened up a possibility to inform the existing scholarly engagement in rethinking the map. Harley's interdisciplinary gesture, however, has hardly been followed. If the artness of cartography attracted much attention from cartographers, cultural geographers, and artists, the artless mechanisms of visuality as the modus operandi of any map failed to ignite the debates in a comparable way. Looking at maps of East Central Europe, the short text will approach them as images, following insights from the field of cartography in visual culture. It will focus on a large map of Slavic Europe, published by the Slavonic philologist Paweł Józef Szafarzyk in 1842, and a small thematic map, the New Europe on a Basis of Nationality, an illustration in the book on the origins of the Great War, authored by another prominent Slavist, the historian R.W. Seton Watson, the founder of the School of Slavonic and Eastern European Studies in London, and known as the maker of New Europe. Could visual analysis uncover unwritten affiliations and aspirations, affections and aversions, which are activated by those maps and which are likely to escape other kinds of analytical approaches? Or more broadly, could visual culture applied to cartography contribute to the process of rethinking the area studies of East Central Europe? Both of the maps advance arguments about the spatial dimension of the region, and both are propositional in nature, as maps normally are. Both aim to activate the territory and are driven by emancipatory aims. Słowacki Zemewit is an unprecedented cartographic vision of the region of Eastern Europe, which never before has been presented as a separate space worthy of its own map and labeled as such. Painstakingly prepared by Szafárik over many years, it reclaims the region occupied by the great empires in 1846. As an imagined linguistic community of Slavs. An inconspicuous map of the New Europe on the basis of nationality, published by Seton Watson 60 years later during the Great War, could count as a next step of this pro-Slavic manifesto. It presents another idealist vision of the post-World War I Europe, in which once enslaved nation of East Central Europe would be liberated and granted their own state borders. The vision soon to be turned into reality during the Parisian Peace Conference. In spite of the affinities of the map makers' agendas, the maps differ in almost every respect. The map maker's nationality, the area covered, dimensions and format, their targeted audiences and impact, as well as their kinship to a broad family of images. This is what I'm after. Słowacki Zemewit, engraved in color by a graphic artist and cartographer Wenceslaw Merklas, is a regular cartographic document belonging to the genre of ethnographic surveys, popular in the 19th century and included in geographical atlases. Its cartographic basis was provided by a series of the topographical maps of Mitteleuropa made for the Prussian army and known for their exceptional accuracy. In this map, the names of all sites are demonstratively turned to Slavonic and spelled in Czech, including those of German places. I'll be showing them close-up soon. The name of the map is rendered in a strikingly ornate lettering at the lower right corner, using several fonts of different scale, evoking Slavic ornaments. Its equally elaborate legend lists all the ethnic groups represented, classified by their languages, and asserts Slavs' domination over the region, both within the group of Indo-European peoples, this is Indo-European, which apart from Slavs, includes Lithuanians, Romanians, Germans, Bulgarians, Greeks, Armenians, and Ossetians, and the northerners on the right-hand side, the Uralic people, Tatar, Turkish, Kalmykian, and Caucasian. Published initially in 600 copies, the map did not function on its own, but was attached as a foldout to Szafárik's book, Słowacki Narodopis, Slavs Ethnography, his popular survey of Slavic languages and folk songs. He's actually talking about the maps in this foreword. By contrast, the New Europe is a small thematic map made of lines and dots, no more than an illustration on a page. It does not aspire to cartographic accuracy, but it would not give up on its rhetorical potential. It is also driven by the anti-Germanic spirit, and more specifically, against the refreshed specter of Mitteleuropa proposed by Friedrich Naumann in 1915. This is actually a French edition of Naumann's book, which was published immediately in English, French, at least those two. A small legend at the bottom of Seton Watson's map, indicating the existing and new frontiers, plus free ports, and especially its overblown title, clearly vying for attention. Both form an important part of the image, emphasizing its manifesto-like message, a project of a regenerated Europe. Seton Watson's map was buried in the book, but Szafazik's map attracted an incomparably wider audience. Słowański Narodopis went through at least 2 editions in the first year and was translated straight away into Polish and Russian. In the latter case, including the map. You can see Skartoju, maybe. It says here, Skartoju. Polish edition didn't have a map. The book's main attraction was indeed the map, which literally activated an imagined community of Slavs, instigating the wave of ethnic pilgrimages across Slavic countries. Stanko Vraz, a leader of the Illyrian movement, recorded its totally unprecedented impact. When I brought a copy of this map, the local patriots and even non-patriots almost tore it out of my hands. All of them cannot get over the fact that the Slav nation is spread so far. The map arouses more patriots. I think I should show, the map arouses more patriots than a whole literature could do. And indeed, literally superimposed on the cartographic matrix of Mitteleuropa and vested in the Herderian glorification of the language and folk culture, Słowański Zemewit emerged as a conscious act of counter-mapping, a powerful script of cultural resistance, a rallying call for pan-Slavism. And the first Slavic Congress in Prague in 1848 opened with Szafazik's speech. Słowański Zemewit initiated the cartographic code to represent the region, adopted in Spruner and Berghaus atlases very soon, and was disseminated throughout the 19th century. But the effectiveness of the map stemmed first and foremost from its visual rhetoric, sanctioned by the authority of cartography. As testified by Vraz's enthusiastic account, the map provided an image of an inhabitable collective identity, of the desirable Slavonic self, but also a visible record of Slavic power. The act of unfolding the map was tantamount to the discovery of the legitimacy of Slavic Europe, spreading from Berlin to the Ural Mountains. The physical features of the territory were largely de-emphasized, but much of the rhetorical power of the map came from its association with landscape, widespread, uniformly green, agrarian, and welcoming. The Czech term Zemewit, which means map, is also a compound of zeme, land, and vid, aspect, thus connoting the act of viewing a land. The affinity of map and landscape is one of the much discussed topics by cultural geography as well as visual culture, both pointing to the tension between the aesthetic values of landscape as an artistic genre and its claim to ownership of the land it represents, whether on the part of land gentry or the communities which defend their shared territory, their ethno-cultural links to the soil. It is from this perspective that Słowański Zemewit reveals its double nature, emancipatory and discriminatory at the same time. The cartographic gaze, the mapmaker's commanding view from above, so clearly implied here, is a particular instant of the disembodied gaze, controlling access to knowledge and power. The vastness of the Slavic land is enhanced by the use of color, and the same shade of green stands for all Slavic people, without any divisions into northern, western, or southern. While the linguistic boundaries between the Slavs are marked by the dainty lines made of dots, The thick state borders of the occupiers, highlighted in red, resemble instead scars on the Slavic body. At the same time, the isolated areas inhabited by non-Slavs, such as Hungarians and Romanians, let alone Germans, are rendered in yellow and in garish shades of pink, which clash and distort the sense of serenity conveyed by the relaxing hues of green. The use of Slavic names restored and confirmed the Slavic rights to the land in much the same way in which German names on the maps of Mitteleuropa were giving authority to the Teutonic expansion. Inclusion is always and inevitably related to exclusion. The countermap turns into the map of domination. Seton Watson's map presents an entirely different image, contributing to the rise of a new cartographic regime of representing East Central Europe in the totally changed political configurations in the middle of World War I. By then, Pan-Slavism, oh my goodness, no, something. By then, Pan-Slavism had already been compromised as a tool of Russian expansionism. The new Europe had to exclude Russia, absorbing instead all the countries liberated from the imperial subjugation, including both Slavic and non-Slavic ones. A totally new cartographic code was needed. In fact, a new image, which would abandon the rhetoric of vastness and cultural affinity and generate a new common denominator for this array of diverse European states. Leaving aside the issue of boundaries, which reflect Seton Watson's pro-Czech and anti-Hungarian sympathies, in the new Europe, the horizontal format of landscape, neither tenable nor suitable any longer, was now replaced by the vertical format of portrait, which had to incorporate a whole cluster of those not yet established political bodies within the narrow stretch of land separating Germany from Russia. Slavic vastness shriveled to a narrow belt of Zwischeneuropa. From the critical cartography perspective, Seton Watson's New Europe is a striking example of an arbitrary geobody. Seton Watson's New Europe was also intended as emancipatory, as restoring sovereignty to the oppressed nations. And its vertical format simply corresponded with their position on the map of Europe, you may say. However, as in Szafazik's map, it was the rhetorical power of the image itself which invested the map with additional layers of meaning and activated its socio-political status in the 20th century. The genre of portrait, as much as landscape, makes various extra aesthetic claims pertaining to the social status and the power of the sitter. Its subspecies, the group portrait, comments on the relationship between individuals, emphasizing the marks of the shared identity based on legal contract, ties of social affiliation. Most often it is represented within a horizontal format of a multi-figure composition, and like a single portrait, is essentially celebratory. The most evocative feature of Seton Watson's New Europe, however, is the disparity between the conventions of a group portrait and a single portrait format. Thus, in contrast to its celebratory caption, it shows an anxiety-ridden image of a chaotic array of new states, small and insecure within their unfixed boundaries, and crowded uncomfortably one on top of another. What they share, the image seems to say, and the cartoon has said it, is their newness, smallness, and instability and propensity to discord. Another significant feature of the New Europe is the suggestion of its separateness. The new state seems to occupy an isolated region, which, in order to be represented, had to be cut off from the larger map of the continent and framed as an independent territory, that of the New Europe, The shutter zones, there are those labels of various maps of this region. The middle tier, as in Hafford Mackinder, the major geopolitician map of 1919, or the belt of political change positioned in between Europe and Asia. If Slovanski Zemewit prompted the long-standing regime of representing Eastern Europe as bound with Russia, which will be taken over during the Cold War, Seton Watson's map established another enduring cartographic trope, which endlessly repeated until the new millennium, naturalized into the most suitable way of understanding East Central Europe, disseminating the message of inherent political volatility. Both were intended as maps of resistance, and both turned into the visual documents of domination and subjugation. And as I argued, it was their affinities to landscape and portrait which offers clues to their oppositional readings. Map making and image making are parallel processes, both at the level of their production and consumption. Maps and images are in constant dialogue, borrow from each other, race against each other, correct and supplement their visual accents, their foci, zooms, their highlights, their blinkers and blindnesses. The image activates the map, and the map activates the image. The territory plays a secondary role in this game. It is the image which matters here. Cartography, critical art history, and visual culture travel along parallel routes and raise similar doubts and benefit from casting a glance over each other's shoulders. And East Central European studies also benefit from such a glance.